Good evening, I'm Ryan Bonazzo. Welcome to Issues and Answers, the 2022 Provincial Candidates Debate for Thunder Bay Superior North. We're coming to you from the traditional territory of the Fort William First Nation as signatories to the Robinson Superior Treaty of 1850. We have representatives from three of the parties on your ballot today. They are, in alphabetical order, Liberal Party candidate Shelby Chung, Tracy McKinnon, representing the Green Party, and Lise Vaugeois of the NDP. We were expecting PC candidate Peng Yu to be in attendance as well. We reached out to his campaign team shortly after the election began. At that time, we were told he would attend. However, we were informed over the long weekend that he would not be participating today, with other commitments cited as the reason. Before we get into the debate portion of the program, let's hear a brief opening statement from each of the candidates in attendance here today. Liberal candidate Shelby Chung, you're up first. 45 seconds on the clock for you.
Thank you. We all know how hard it is to have Northern Ontario issues recognized in Southern Ontario. And regardless of what party is in power, our voice must be strong enough to overcome the noise in Queen's Park. I'm a leader. I've never been afraid to make tough choices, stand up for people, and show up. There are two things in life that are for certain: death and taxes. No matter who's in power, the money will be collected. What matters to us is who it's collected from and where the money is spent. We can let the middle class pay for Doug Ford's highway to cottage country, or we can raise taxes for corporations with over $1 billion in profit and use that money to invest into housing, healthcare, education, small businesses, seniors, families. Sorry, I ran out of time. Thank you.
Next up, Tracy McKinnon of the Green Party. 45 seconds on the clock.
Bonjour, Ozawa Beniti Kwe, Kwanmul Ontario Nodoji, Name my Dodam. I said my spirit name I was given by a traditional medicine man is Yellow Thunderbird Woman. I'm from Cornwall, Ontario, and I was adopted twice in my life, the second into the Sturgeon clan, Miigwech Clara. Poverty is a social detriment of health. Eliminating poverty requires systemic action on all fronts with safe, secure, affordable housing at its core. The current social assistance systems continue to perpetuate the cycle of poverty nationwide. If we really are to effect change, we need to be more inclusive, more diverse, and listen to people with lived experiences and their stories of navigating the systems set up to help them. Far too many, like injured workers, are falling through the cracks in the system set up to help them. We can make change by using our collective voices in unison. One voice is good, many voices are better.
Thank you, candidate McKinnon. We will now conclude with the NDP's Lise Vaugeois.
Decades of cuts by Liberal and Conservative governments have left every part of our region struggling to provide quality public health care and quality public education. We need infrastructure that is resilient to climate change, well-maintained highways, safe emergency transportation, affordable, well-built housing, and the restoration of our conservation authorities so they can monitor and manage flood zones. The NDP has always had the interests of working people and the well-being of communities at heart. This is why we exist, and this is why only the NDP will fix what has been so badly broken. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Vaugeois. We're going to take a quick break now. When we return, we will begin the question and debate portion of the program. Issues and Answers will be back right after this. Welcome back to Issues and Answers, the 2022 provincial candidates debate for Thunder Bay Superior North. During this portion of the program, I'll pose a direct question to one of the candidates. After giving them about a minute or so to respond, we'll then open that question up to the floor for debate. This first question is about cost of living, and it goes to Green candidate Tracy McKinnon. The price of just about everything is up dramatically, from food at the grocery store to gas at the pumps. Many people across this region are struggling just to afford the essentials. How will you fight to make life more affordable?
Great question, Ryan. The Green Party will, for people like me living on ODSP on low income, will immediately double the ODSP rates and or implement a guaranteed livable or basic income. That, I think, is the way out of this recession, if I can call it recession. And I believe when people have the money they need, they will invest locally, they will invest in their community, and that's win-win for everyone. Yes, it's an investment, it's a huge investment. However, it's an investment that I think is needed right across the board to help people of, with disabilities, with low-income single parents, injured workers, just anyone that needs a hand up. It's not a handout, it's a hand up.
Thank you, candidate McKinnon. We'll now open that question up to the floor. Again, candidates, we are talking cost of living. How will you fight to make life more affordable? Who wants to go first?
Yeah, sure. First of all, we will regulate the price of gas. No party has ever had the courage to take on the oil companies and do this. We have the legal ability to do it through the Ontario Energy Act, and we will do that. Cutting taxes on those gas prices will not help anything. We've seen that in Alberta and elsewhere, that the companies just fill the gap. We also need, we've lost control of hydro. We've lost the profits that the province should be getting by privatizing part of hydro. That's something that the Liberals did. We also know that we need to raise ODSP OW rates. At first 20% immediately, doubling in the second year. There are many other things. Food security, we know how important it is to be supporting local food security, and we see wonderful things happening in our community in that regard, and we support those things.
Doug Ford's Conservatives like to talk about the little guy, but they've been missing in action in these past 4 years as things get more expensive for Ontarians. Ontario Liberals have a balanced, progressive, and fully costed plan to help families with the rising costs. We'll pay for this initiative with fair taxes for corporations with over $1 billion in profits and individuals with taxable income with $500,000. Ontario Liberals will also help those in need with a 20% increase. These are on our plans too. And we also have the backing of 28,000 Ontarians, many local, who've put their time and energy into our plan, and that's what we give to you.
Candidates, any rebuttals from the floor? Anything else to say on cost of living and making life more affordable?
I would just like to add, because I think that the Liberal platform sounds brilliant, but when the Liberals were in power, it echoes the NDP platform in many respects, but when they were in power, they cut from education, they cut from health care.
2018 wants their argument back.
Well, we know what was left behind for us, and I don't understand why we should see the Liberals suddenly as a new party when they are being led by somebody who was in the government who made those cuts.
Candidate Chung.
2018 wants their comments back.
Candidate McKinnon, before we move on, last words to you.
Just again, the Greens, if elected, will double ODSP rates and implement a basic income. I believe that's our way out.
All right. Okay, we will move on now to health care candidates. And NDP candidate Lise Vaugeois, this is for you. The healthcare sector is in crisis here in the Northwest. It's a struggle to attract doctors and nurses to the region. Paramedics are waiting hours just to offload their patients at hospital, and some people in medical distress can't get an ambulance at all. What is your plan to improve the sector?
We need to bring funding back into healthcare. It needs to be a priority. We need to create incentives to bring more workers back into healthcare. We also have to get rid of Bill 124, which has kept healthcare workers at a 1% limit to their wages and also kept them from bargaining. So that has to be removed. We know that long-term care was privatized during the Harris government, but we also know that it was further privatized during the 15 years of the Liberal era. Long-term care needs to come back under public management and ownership. We will build new publicly owned long-term care, and we will also, over time, bring the private long-term care homes back under public ownership.
Okay. Candidates, we will now open that question up for debate. We're talking health care. What's your plan to improve the sector?
For-profit long-term care is the biggest mistake of the 20th century, and that's what our leader says today. Not in 2018, today. We have today's problems and today's issues. I've been contacted by hundreds of healthcare professionals asking for my help in fighting Doug Ford's for-profit agenda. The Conservative playbook has always been the same. Starve public services with cuts, and then call on the private sector, his friends, for help. It's shameful that in a province as healthy and wealthy as we are, that Doug Ford and friends profit from our suffering. We are going to hire 100,000 healthcare workers to replace retiring workers and expand our system. We'll create more nursing and medical school spaces, and we'll cover tuition costs for medical nursing students working in northern remote communities. We'll pay PSWs more.
Let's allow Green candidate Tracy McKinnon some time here on this topic.
Great question. I didn't answer this one last year, but I'm going to answer it this year. I think that needs to be answered. We know what a critical state our healthcare is in right now. The Greens will focus on preventing illnesses and we will provide healthy outcomes and quality care at the lowest cost to the public purse. These include increases to publicly funded mental health, create an accessible system with around-the-clock care access, improve access for childcare, children, youth, and students, treat mental health and addiction as a public health issue, expand support for addiction care, expand care options for people with complex needs.
Candidates, we do have to move on, but first, anything else on health care before we move on to another topic?
Just a reminder that long-term care was in crisis before the Conservatives came. They made it infinitely worse, but we knew the problems were there and have known they've been there for a very long time.
Okay, so shots fired at the PC party from a couple of the candidates there. Again, they were invited to attend. The candidate chose not to be here today. We're going to move on to the issue of violent crime, and this question is for Liberal candidate Shelby Chung. In recent years, residents have been bombarded with news of large drug busts, firearm seizures, and home invasions. And area police services don't feel they've received as much guns and gangs funding from the province as they need to tackle the issue. How will you address violent crime here in the Northwest?
Thunder Bay has been home to rising firearm and homicides and gang and gun violence. Our plan is to accept the federal government's buyback offer program, partner with the federal government to stop gun smuggling at the Ontario-US borders. And, you know, I know that the Liberal government has a plan to ban handguns, but I've also heard loud and clear during the campaign that often these things don't work in the North. So a Southern Ontario solution often doesn't work in the North. And it's the Liberal plan to consult, and with me as their voice around the table, we're going to come up with a solution that solves this problem that isn't pie in the sky. And because I've been dealing with this for 8 years on Thunder Bay City Council. It's bad. It is so bad. And yet we are starved for attention and resources. And that's what we need to bring back to our community.
Thank you very much, candidate Chung. Candidates, we will now open that question up to the floor. Violent crime, what is you and your party's plan to address the issue?
I've got 2 points to make. First of all, the province, I believe the province paid for the city to do a study of crime and well-being for the community. However, the funding hasn't been there to implement that plan. So the NDP and I personally will make sure that we have the funding so that we can do what is needed. The other piece of it is that we have many people living in poverty in the city, and that really makes them vulnerable to the kind of home invasions that we are seeing. If we can raise ODSP, OW rates to a level where people are not so vulnerable, then I think that that's another big piece of solving that problem.
Green candidate Tracy McKinnon, you haven't weighed in on this issue yet.
I think most people know me that know that a good friend of mine's daughter was murdered 4 years ago. That was a violent crime. That was horrific. And as a community member, I've seen it firsthand, as Shelby had mentioned. With her on City Council the last 8 years, she's seen it as well. And I do believe what Lise just mentioned about raising the rates, that would, I believe, help those who are living in poverty, give them a hand up rather than a handout, so they can move to a better places to live. They won't have to, surf on someone's couch, or they won't have to have a roommate, or they won't have to put themselves in vulnerable situations which can lead to violent crimes. That's, just if elected, the Greens will, double the ODSP rates and implement a guaranteed livable income or a basic income for low-income community members that are struggling.
Candidates, anything else to say regarding violent crime and how we tackle it? And remember, you can weigh in at any time while we're on this topic.
I think upstream investment into people's mental health. Our mental health crisis is ballooning out of control. Opioid addiction is rampant in the city. One person every 3 days dies in Thunder Bay, and that is from opioid addiction. And that opioid addiction is fueling the gangs and guns in our city and in the region. That's where we need to have the upstream investment that have been cut by the Conservative government and reinvest into things that matter.
I can't disagree with that. Mental health is under the NDP platform to be covered by OHIP. We know how important it is. We certainly know how critical the opioid crisis is in terms of the health and well-being of people in our community.
It's cruel for the NDP to say everyone in the province will receive mental health through OHIP, but then only budget $64 a person. That barely covers half a visit.
I don't believe that to be correct, but
It's on your website.
Don't
All
have
4
those
renditions
figures.
of it.
Okay, and how much money are you putting in?
$300 million into mental health across the province.
I'm sorry, but that doesn't tell me how that breaks down per person. So I don't think we can
$300
actually
million
pursue this.
across the province.
Candidate McKinnon, last word to you before we move on.
Just mental health is such a critical issue that all parties should be talking about it. It was a crisis situation before COVID-19, and the pandemic has only made things worse.
Thank you, candidates. We will now take a short break and be back with more questions and debate as Issues and Answers continue. Stay with us. Welcome back to Issues and Answers, the 2022 provincial candidates debate for Thunder Bay Superior North. We're going to keep going with our questions now, and this next one is for Green candidate Tracy McKinnon. We've spoken already about violent crime to do with police. Let's talk more broadly about emergency services. Every year, municipalities are forced to allocate more and more of their annual budget to emergency services. This has forced residents to either pay higher taxes or endure service cuts in other areas. If elected, what will your party do to help municipalities pay for police, fire, and EMS?
That's a good question. Emergency services. I don't have a great answer. We can't afford to wait to treat workers with respect they deserve, including paid sick days and fair wages. During the last 2 years, we've seen the healthcare crisis, how severe it was prior to the pandemic, made more so by the pandemic. PSWs and nursing, doctor shortages, and then of course the ambulance, the frontline services. I mean, tax the 1%, the ones that make hundreds of millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's we have to do something, and that's let's start, instead of taking from the poor, let's take from the rich and help bring everybody up to the same level.
Okay, let's open this up to the floor now. And a reminder, candidates, this is municipal budgets, the rising cost of police, EMS, and fire. If elected, what is your plan to help those municipalities get by?
1/3 of our tax base for municipalities, 1/3 come from police, fire, EMS. It is absolutely out of control. I've spent my time on council fighting alongside with our mayor to bring mental health facilities to Thunder Bay. There are a lot of new mental health pressures: the pandemic, global conflict, social media, and climate change. People, especially our kids and families, are feeling more stressed and anxious and depressed, and we need help. The NDP have a dream. We have a plan. We're going to train 3,000 new mental health and addictions professionals, reducing wait time for mental health care. I was a member of the Thunder Bay DSAB Social Services Board for 8 years and saw firsthand how the need for supportive housing and services are needed in the area. As a part of our plan, we're going to build 15,000 more supportive homes for mental health and addictions, invest $300 million in the prevention and treatment of opioid addiction, which is so badly needed in the north, and make life-saving harm reduction supplies sites more available.
I want to let candidate Vaugeois weigh in. Candidate Vaugeois, you're being told that your party's plan is a dream. What say you?
Well, we've seen how Liberal governments have not funded mental health care, and we've seen many things over the years that have not happened that have been promised. I will say that we know how critical these services are. We know that many communities don't have the resources to really address the mental health and addictions problems, which are part of what we're talking about here. And we know that those communities need to be supported beyond their small tax bases. They need that money, they need the commitment to those services so that they can function well. And we know that municipal budgets cannot carry these by themselves, and that is where the province has the responsibility and the ability to support those needs.
Candidates, any more to say on this topic? Okay, let's move on to the economy and jobs, and this is for NDP candidate Lise Vaugeois. For decades, many residents have been forced to leave northwestern Ontario to find good-paying jobs. Municipalities in the area have seen their populations decline or stagnate over the years. How will you and your party attract jobs and subsequently people to our area?
We have many opportunities in the north. We know that there are a lot of mining projects coming up. We also know that those mining projects have to be managed responsibly and in such a way that they benefit future generations, and that the environmental challenges raised by those projects are not left for future generations. We also need value-added projects. We can manufacture our things in our region if we choose to make those investments, and we will make those investments.
All right, candidates, let's open that up to the floor now. We're talking jobs and the economy. What is the plan?
It used to be if you worked hard and played by the rules, you could get ahead. And some days it just doesn't feel like that anymore. I remember when the North was an affordable place to live and do business. For much of the past 2 years, Ontario hasn't been open for business. The pandemic's devastating impact on the jobs and small businesses were made worse by Doug Ford's chaotic decision-making. Small local businesses like mine were ground to a halt, yet big box stores and grocers made record profits. And I'm here to be part of the rebuild.
Candidate McKinnon.
So, jobs and economy. We have a lot of work to do to build the Ontario we want, where your gender or color of your skin does not create barriers to the quality of life you live. Again, I'll go back to the basic income. We had the Ontario Basic Income Pilot Project, we had the CERB, we had the CRB during the pandemic. We know programs like this work. We have people living in poverty that are struggling. Some even have a job or part-time jobs and still are struggling. I believe that's a way out. People need a hand up, not a hand out.
Well, and I believe candidate McKinnon brings up a good point as well. I mean, she talks about the basic income pilot. So let's go there. 30 seconds to each of you. Would your party reinstate the basic income pilot? Candidate Chung.
Absolutely. Two things. Reinstate the basic income pilot and create a regional living wage. That doesn't mean that a business owner in Thunder Bay or the region would be spending money, the same amount on their employees as Toronto. So it's a regional living wage, and I think those two things together will bring back economic dignity for our people.
Lise Vaugeois of the NDP.
Yes, we will bring back the Basic Income Pilot Project, and we will also be raising the minimum wage. Both of those things are critical. There is no reason for people to be living in poverty in our region. Ontario is a very wealthy province. We don't always see that wealth in Northern Ontario, but we should be seeing that wealth at least some of that wealth in Northern Ontario. We generate enormous wealth here. Much of it goes to Southern Ontario. That can be shared much better.
Thank you, Candidate Vaugeois. Candidate McKinnon, you have said that your party does plan to reinstitute the basic income pilot. Anything else to say, jobs and the economy, before we move on?
We know jobs are critical to a recovery. We've been through this struggle of COVID. We know that there's a lot of work to be done. There's all kinds of work to be done in our region. We need the resources to pursue that work, which also means getting our fair share of money from Queen's Park. We generate wealth. We can also receive that wealth.
Any final words, candidates? Fantastic. Okay, this next question goes to Liberal candidate Shelby Chung, and we are talking climate change and particularly the effects on First Nations. And while climate change hurts all of us, First Nations communities continue to be disproportionately impacted with evacuations due to spring flooding and summer forest fires, for example. If elected, how will your party work with First Nations and the federal government to address issues of climate change?
You know what? Climate change, we've seen floods in Thunder Bay and the area 2012, 2016, 2022. We need our communities to be resilient and ahead of the climate change curve. The people of Kashechewan do not want to have to evacuate their communities every year and be spread out. The climate change emergency is happening now. Ontarians know this. They see this, and when they drive around their homes, and due to the floods and fires that we're seeing. Ontario used to be a global leader in climate change, and then the Ford Conservatives happened, and Ontario went backwards. An elected Ontario government will re-establish Ontario's leadership on the environment, cutting greenhouse gas emissions by 50% below the 2005 levels by 2030.
All right, candidates, let's open this up to the floor now. We were talking climate change and particularly the impact on First Nations in the North that we have seen so often in recent years. Who'd like to weigh?
Do we flip a coin?
All right. I'll jump in. First of all, we should be and will be in a nation-to-nation relationship with First Nations. First Nations know also what they need, but they need support to achieve their economic independence and their also ability to be believed that where they have been put is not a healthy place for them to be living. Environmental protections have been gutted. They've been gutted for a long time, but certainly by the Ford government, they've been gutted, and they need to be addressed. And I think that's the bottom line, is that climate change is real. No communities are up for sacrifice. Every single community deserves to have a clean, safe environment, and that's the bottom line.
Candidates, I remind you, you are free to debate back and forth at any time, but Green candidate Tracy McKinnon, this is right in your party's wheelhouse.
So I'm just going to mention yesterday was the one-year anniversary of the 215 children found in Kamloops, BC. We need to strengthen those relationships with the Indigenous communities. I commit to upholding Indigenous rights to self-determination and to act with respect, with real respect and treaty obligations. In this province, we have seen successive governments fail to uphold the rights of Indigenous people. Too often, particularly in rural and remote communities in the north, day-to-day needs like clean water and access to quality healthcare have been neglected. It is critical for Ontario to act in true partnership with Indigenous communities for funding and infrastructure projects. And just as importantly, it is critical that these investments are led by Indigenous leaders who know the communities best. We will implement the UNDRIP to ensure equity for Indigenous peoples and commit to implement the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
Candidates, any other words on climate change? Okay, well then we will take a break. Thank you, candidates. We will be back with more issues and answers right after this. Welcome back to Issues and Answers, the 2022 provincial candidates debate for Thunder Bay Superior North. Candidates, we are going to throw this next question out to the floor right away for free-flowing debate, and it's about education. Students and educators have had to endure so much over the last 2+ years of this pandemic, jumping from in-person to online learning and back again. For those who see education as a top priority in this election, why should they vote for you?
Students across the province have been dealt a unfair deal over the past 2 years. Remote learning, lost social time, struggles with isolation are familiar to every family. Online learning for children isn't about modernization. It's about Doug Ford making cuts and underservicing Ontarians. He cut $1.3 billion out of our kids' education while in office. We don't need a $10 billion highway for the GTA to get Ford and friends to the cottage quicker. What we need is to close the education gap left by the pandemic. Our kids don't need more screen time. They need to be with teachers who care. They need to be making friends and relationships, getting outside, touching grass, and kicking a ball.
Candidates, who wants to go next?
Tracy?
After 2 chaotic years inside the classroom, students and teachers need the government to bring stability into the school system and to get back to high-quality in-person education. Learning is one of the great joys of living. We should all have access to education and training that suits our abilities and interests. Our lifelong learning curve should not be cut short by unnecessary obstacles. The 21st century educational system needs to keep pace with the changes and requirements of a society in transition. We need new funding models and clear, affordable pathways to higher education. For the Greens, building a modern, more equitable education system is a must. Properly funding our educational support workers and retaining strong and committed teachers is paramount. Investments in education are important for the health and well-being and success of kids and young people now and for our future.
Candidate Bourgeois, let's give you a chance to weigh in.
Right. Now, education was in crisis actually before the Conservatives came into power. There had already been systematic cuts over a very long period of time
Fighting
to
a ghost.
education. And I know that Shelby and the Liberals would like us to think that this is a brand new party.
It is a brand new
that
party.
is, well, then it's a party with no experience. If that's the way you want to play
Well, you
it.
can't have it both, Lees. You can't have it both. It's either you hold us to 2018 or we're a brand new party without experience.
15 years in government.
You can't have both.
You
Both
have
like the NDP.
so now you have a brand new party,
Brand new
people,
party,
no
a costed
experience,
plan,
no history,
fully costed plan,
but no
28,000
history.
Ontarians
We've
behind
heard
it.
these plans every 4 years. They come up. The Liberals always present themselves as for the people. When they govern, they actually don't. And we saw those cuts year after year, over 15 years. And then, of course, the Ford government comes in and cuts even more. And then they disguise their cuts. So what they've done is they've taken the child care money from the federal government and put it into the education budget. That Conservative education budget represents a $1.2 billion cut to public education. We also know that the Conservatives, while we're on it, if I may, provided COVID testing kits to all the private schools and not the public schools until it came out in public. That is deceptive.
I want to give candidate Chung a chance to respond. Obviously, candidate Bourgeois talking about the PCs, but also your party as well and your track record.
She talks about experience, and so far I'm the only one with experience around this table. The Liberal plan will see the reintroduction of grade 13 to close the education gap to better prepare students, hire 10,000 more teachers, teach classes on things that matter in real life, like mental health, education, and literacy, and taxes, and more. End mandatory online learning for students, but create high-quality options for students that choose them. You know your kids best. These last 2 years have been hard on them. We need students to be ready for a changing world, and with a Liberal plan, that's what we're going to do.
Candidate McKinnon, I want to give you a chance to weigh in.
Wow. The Greens, if elected, will improve funding models for education, strengthen in-school learning, make equity a pillar of education, public education, support children with disabilities, improve access and equity in post-secondary education.
Well, and candidate McKinnon, you talk about post-secondary education as well. So let's talk tuition prices, because there are plenty of post-secondary education students around this province who see that as a top priority in this election. And
So is
any
that the
candidate can
tracing?
weigh in.
We're going to give $2,000 to those who go into apprenticeships, and will support new ways to becoming an apprentice. The business owners that I've spoken with need specifically trained workers and a talent pool available to them. We'll work with employers to help people develop job-specific skills quickly through short, specialized programs. This won't happen overnight or by accident. We need a strategic vision and a strong plan, and we've got both.
The cost of post-secondary education has gone through the roof. This didn't happen just over the last 4 years. It's been building for a long time, and successive Conservative and Liberal governments have been depending on international students to make up the difference. It's not fair to those students. It's not fair to our students. Tuition needs to come down, and funding to universities as a whole needs to be increased. It's
You can't
been
say
very
you're making
difficult.
cuts and then not increase. Where's the money? Show me the money that you're going to increase, because the Liberal plan has a plan to increase the operational grants to universities and colleges.
And so do we. So, and as I say, it's moved into this crisis place over a very long period of time, not just the last 4 years, which have certainly made it worse, but the problems in the funding of universities predate the Conservative government and need to be addressed at a very fundamental level. Students are paying too much for tuition, and universities at the administrative level are also being denied the funds they need to provide respectful class sizes in which students can actually learn. I teach at the university, I see this firsthand.
Candidates, any last words on education as a whole? Tuition prices, elementary or secondary education, wherever you'd like to go.
The Greens, if elected, will establish an independent review of Ontario's education funding formula so it adequately reflects students' needs, and review the formula every 5 years while ensuring the unique needs of rural and remote schools are taken into account.
The university and college students and the university, the medical school, the law school, all play an integral part in Northern Ontario. And we can't lose sight of the fact that we need international graduates. That's being strategic, and it's an investment into our people and to keep and attract and retain people in the North. As part of the plan, alienating international students isn't part of it.
I did not say anything about alienating international students.
I didn't say you said that.
Okay. International students are important, but they are actually paying the lion's share of our costs at universities, and that is not right. We should
Because
be
it's
supporting.
subsidized by our taxpayer.
Well, I'm not going to go there because there
Why
are
not?
so
No,
many.
you said that.
Yes.
Universities are subsidized by our taxpayer.
Absolutely.
Which is why we get a
And
certain
yet,
rate.
when we
International
study-
students are not.
When we study in Europe, we are also subsidized. So it's kind of a broken argument. What we need is we are bringing workers to this country through those international student programs. It is actually an excessive head tax if you want to really think of it in context. We know that our public institutions
Outside
need
funding
to
is
be
a great
funded,
source
need
of revenue
to be
for our
funded
universities.
properly, and we need our tax dollars to be going actually to support these public institutions, not going to support a $10 billion highway in Southern Ontario, for example, which nobody wants.
Candidate McKinnon, last word to you before we move on.
I can say Greens, if elected, will invest in partnerships with northern post-secondary institutions so that the North can lead the way in the new mining technology and innovation careers, and support the University of Sudbury in becoming a Northern University by and for Francophones.
Candidates, one last topic before we move on to closing statements. I want to talk about long-term care. We've spoke about health care, but let's get specific now. More than 100 people across northwestern Ontario lost their lives to COVID-19. Many of the deaths came in long-term care facilities. So how will your party ensure that our seniors are kept safe and well cared for? Who wants to open up?
Privatizing long-term care was the biggest mistake of the 20th century. Words from our leader. Ontario needs a revolution in the way it does care for our parents and grandparents. In the past year, we've seen elders suffer in horrifying conditions to the point that our military had to be called in. Heartbreaking memories that should never be erased. People needed baths and they were dehydrated. It's absolutely unacceptable. The Liberal plan We'll support 15,000 new assisted living homes, including small, accessible, and community-based residential services. We'll help 400,000 more seniors get home care with a $2 billion annual investment by 2026. As we transition away from the conservative long-term care system, we'll place audits, inspectors, and zero-tolerance sanctions on long-term care homes that endanger our residents. It's only going to be with a Liberal plan that this will happen.
Candidates McKinnon or Vaugeois, who else wants to weigh in here?
I do, but go ahead, Tracy.
Okay, the government failed to keep long-term care residents safe during the pandemic, a bad situation made worse by a government that failed to act. In Canada, long-term care residents made up 81% of all reported COVID-19 deaths, compared to an average of 38% in other countries. The Toronto Star reported in December 2021 that the for-profit long-term care operators paid nearly $171 million in dividends to shareholders in the first 3 quarters of 2020, and receiving $138.5 million in pandemic funding. The Greens, if elected, will build more nonprofit long-term care beds, create an accountable nonprofit long-term care system, improve resident care, prepare for future infectious disease outbreaks.
Candidate Vaugeois.
Long-term care was privatized during the previous Conservative government, the Mike Harris government. The Liberals then had 15 years to actually address that problem and did not. In fact, even more long-term care was privatized during that era. We know that we need more facilities, publicly owned. We also know that we need to bring back those privately owned long-term care facilities, bring them back under public ownership and public management. That will take time as their licenses come up for renewal. But that is our commitment. That is what we have always stood for and continue to stand for.
Candidates, we have about 30 more seconds. Any more words on this topic before we move on?
It's a new plan, and we have a lot for seniors and long-term health care in our plan.
Candidate McKinnon?
The Greens, if elected, will expand options to age in place and improve home care.
The NDP has always stood for strong, publicly owned services. This is not a change, and it's not a sudden change of color.
Okay, thank you very much, candidates. This brings the debate portion of our program to a close. When we return, we'll hear from some of the other candidates vying for the Thunder Bay Superior North seat at Queen's Park. Stay tuned for more issues and answers. Welcome back to Issues and Answers, the 2022 provincial candidates debate for Thunder Bay Superior North. Before we get closing statements from our in-studio guests here today, let's hear from some of the other candidates on the ballot. Here now, in alphabetical order, are Adam Cherry of the Consensus Party, Ontario Party candidate Stephen Hufnagel, New Blue candidate Catherine Sutari, and Andy Wolf representing the Northern Ontario Party.
My name is Adam Cherry, and I am your Consensus Ontario candidate, right here up in the Thunder Bay, Superior North. I've excelled in a number of roles, including successfully running a Canadian music label, which has generated international exposure. I was born in Canada, and I plan on strengthening our community safety throughout the Thunder Bay area. Obvious that the long-term future of Ontario is its north. Bottom line, only a consensus MPP can bring your municipality's true priorities to the decision makers at the Queen's Park. Old-style top-down party politics will never be able to present your true needs ahead of their party.
Hello, I'm Stephen Hufnagel. For 37 years, my wife and I made our family a priority to raise them on principles that gave our 4 adult children and now 3 grandchildren a good foundation for life. I am honored to stand with the Ontario Party, as the Ontario Party platform is based on the same foundation of principles and values and freedoms that our family and our great province of Ontario was founded on. These principles and values and freedoms have been trampled and crushed by our current Ford government in these recent years, and they have stolen from us and destroyed what made Ontario a wonderful and prosperous place to live. The Ontario Party will restore our province back to the foundations that place value on everyone's family, faith, and freedom. That's something we're standing up for. I'm humbled to be given the honor to serve you, the people of Thunder Bay in Northern Ontario, to give you the opportunity to thrive once more.
Hi, I'm Kathy Sutari. I'm running for the New Blue Party in the Thunder Bay Superior North riding. I decided to run on the basis of talking with a lot of people and hearing their concerns. And the New Blue Party offers me those same issues that these people are asking about and complaining about. The 4 main issues are respecting our rights and freedoms as we were given, health care, education, and government accountability and transparency. And of course the economy, but there's a lot more issues. So I would really like to address those issues, and I would like to say thank you for all my supporters.
My name is Andy Wolf, and I'm your Northern Ontario Party candidate for Thunder Bay Superior North. One of the items I will put before legislature is to make it law. All political parties have a right to participate in all public debates of any kind, so you have an opportunity to see all candidates' viewpoints. Unlike other parties you have seen, my commitment to you is to represent the riding that elected me. I am not bound by any party agenda. Put a wolf in legislature, because in a room full of sheep, a wolf always wins. On June 2nd, elect Andy Wolf, NOP, Northern Ontario Party.
And unfortunately, due to the late cancellation from PC candidate Peng Yu, we did not have time to collect his statement. So before we wrap our program this evening, let's hear final words from our 3 candidates in attendance. Liberal candidate Shelby Chung, you now have 45 seconds for your closing statement.
Thank you. What plan does Doug Ford offer? He doesn't have a plan. He has control. Control over candidates who couldn't stand up to him and show up for a local debate. He went from being on a campaign sign to being on a milk carton. The NDP offers something different. They offer fear. Fear of Kathleen's ghost, and an uncosted plan with more additions than the Canadian Oxford Dictionary. The new Ontario Liberal plan was done in consultation with 28,000 Ontarians. Our plan sees our kids closing the education gap left by the pandemic, helping small businesses fill Main Street again, and making sure our grandparents and parents are getting the care that they need. While my fellow candidates look to the past, I'm looking to the future. I see a future with a strong economy for our region.
Thank you, candidate Chung. Green Party candidate Tracy McKinnon, 45 seconds to you.
Today, there's no question that unhoused people are suffering a fate worse than being homeless and in a shelter. Regressive policies are more aggressively denying shelter and housing as a basic human right. We need to work together to eliminate poverty in our lifetimes. We need to advocate for the basic income. We had MINCOM, Ontario Basic Income Pilot Project, CERB, and CRB. These programs were considered a minimum amount needed for basic monthly survival pre-pandemic. and during the pandemic. We can make sustainable changes to help others. Those living in poverty, those on assistance of some form, those like me. We're tired of living well below the poverty line. It's time to demand change, demand more, demand basic income. Thanks.
Thank you, candidate McKinnon. Finally, Lise Vaugeois of the NDP. 45 seconds.
Thank you. With fair, predictable expectations and clear environmental standards, I truly believe we can build a sustainable and prosperous present that we will be proud to leave for our children. Decades of cuts by Liberal and Conservative governments have left people struggling with every aspect of their lives. And frankly, if Shelby is right, the leader of the Liberal Party is indeed a ghost of Liberals' past. We can do so much better. Only the NDP will fix what has been so badly broken. I am strong, and I have the skills and experience, and I am ready to work hard for the people of Northwestern Ontario. On June 2nd, vote for Lise Vaugeois and the NDP. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Vaugeois, and thank you to all of the candidates in studio here with us today, and all of those who have put their name on the ballot to represent the people of Thunder Bay Superior North. And thank you at home for watching. We hope that this has helped you come to a decision about who you would like to vote for on June 2nd or before, no matter which candidate that is. Remember to get out and vote, and be sure to tune in tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock for our Thunder Bay Atikokan debate right after the TBT NewsHour. Have a good night, everybody.